What's going on, everybody? It's Frito here for Your Overwatch. It's been quite the emotional few weeks. We went from analyzing a wink from Emong, breaking down the in-depth wink meta, teasing out that it's gotta be a hero ban system, right? From that to then Jeff saying hero bans suck and they're not on board for bans, making us think that we're gonna go a completely different direction, but not really. The developer update dropped on us like a bomb yesterday that it wasn't just bans, it was like bans on steroids. Hero pools is a much bigger, all-encompassing solution than we expected, and honestly, at first, I felt it was overkill, over the top, terrified about how it could affect the game. But over the course of a very emotional day, talking about it amongst my friends, reading all sorts of feedback on it, I'm far more pro the system than I thought I was ever going to be. And I'll get into more discussing that in our next video. I'm going to be having a discussion with Sam Mito and Nateson on the channel, and we're going to discuss our issues as well as some of the good things that are going to come from a hero pool system in Overwatch. And ultimately, it is a far bigger solution than single ban was going to be. Hero pools makes my let's do single ban argument look like some quaint, small, minor change. Yes, hero pools feels wacky and chaotic, but haven't I been talking about for years, it feels like, that Overwatch seriously has to take a look at its game format? And well, groundbreaking game format changes are going to be uncomfortable no matter what, so I'm excited to get into testing it and seeing it work in about a month. We're going to get into a bunch of Jeff Kaplan's responses on the forums in this regard, but the base point that I want to just bring up to everybody is that Overwatch was sold to us as a game about swapping heroes and having diverse strategies come head to head, and it's never played like that, and instead has rewarded specialization and breaking the meta, essentially, to find the most broken comp that can't be countered rather than flexibly adapting to your opponent. And that's not the gameplay we signed up for, actually, and such a radical system like hero pools produces the gameplay the game was promising at launch. Change is scary, of course, but I'm on board for that journey because remember, as the devs have said, we're dealing with a new type of Overwatch development cycle where changes can go and go away much quicker than before. Even if it blows up in their faces, it will only last a season. And I think what's more likely to happen, actually, is with the amount of variety that is baked into the base format of the game, though there will be growing pains for sure, don't get me wrong, massive growing pains, just like there was with 222, at the end of the day, we'll probably be happier that some of the core promises of the game design get fulfilled in that new system. Now, let's get on to looking at Jeff Kaplan's responses to feedback thus far on the forums. Here, forum poster Persevere kind of sums up essentially what I have said in the intro so far, but Jeff Kaplan responds to this in saying, "Thanks for the feedback. Oddly, we're not viewing this change as dramatic, scary, or impactful as the decisions to pursue hero limits or a decision to implement role queue. Hero pools will be introduced for Season 21 of competitive play only. Unlike role queue or hero limits, quick play and arcade will be completely the same as they are today, even when they do introduce hero pools. This alone already means the number of affected matches is far less than those two prior systems." That's important to remember because a lot of players play only quick play, right? And of course, he goes on to say here that they always can change this from season to season anyway. And they have got a lot of feedback that players want each season to feel, quote, different from one another. And, well, this is quite different, right? A completely new system to experience the game. Season 21 will be remembered for that, and that's kind of a cool thing. Jeff goes on to say, also, something we talk a lot about in game design is that there is often no one correct answer. Design is all about trade-offs. If the thing that the community decides is the most egregious is a static meta, and they want the dev team to do something about it, we're going to take steps towards change. We can't force the meta to move and not make the game work differently. Last year was great proof that player creativity and balance changes alone weren't enough to move people off 3-3 fast enough for the community to feel satisfied. The community would have moved on its own, just slowly, which nobody wants. We've decided to help you move it along. If there are things we don't like about hero pools, we can change it. Maybe they don't come back for season 22. Maybe they rotate faster. Maybe more or less heroes should be in the pool. We'll all find out in season 21. This is a super important point that I wish the community was more attuned to the realities of balance and how it works. And I don't mean to be rude when I say this, but I know a lot of players come from vastly different areas of gaming into Overwatch. It might be your first competitive game, your first shooter game. Like if you've played Minecraft for your whole gaming career and then all of a sudden playing a competitive game, the expectations of like what balance even does in games is just totally off in the Overwatch community sometimes. So when I hear people say things like, well, they just need to balance the game so all things are good, it fundamentally doesn't understand what balance is. When you make balance tweaks, there are winners and losers. Never are two items in a game or characters that do the same job get equal playability at the same time. If you can point to a game and show me where that happens, I'm glad to have that discussion, but that's just not how competitive games work. In RTS games like StarCraft or MOBAs, there's much more complex systems like resources, economy. There's early game strategies and late game strategies. In comparison, Overwatch is a far simpler game where you've got an objective, you got team fights, there's some resource with your cooldowns and ultimates, of course, but really you're fighting to do the same thing, win team fights and capture objectives. There isn't all these other knobs to twist in order to make multiple ways of playing the game. And there's about 1 million ways that I could go about explaining this in Overwatch, but just some super fast forward ways. There's never been a time where Hanzo and Soldier could see equal viability. Because if you say, well, I want all heroes to be good, that ignores the fact that balance is always relative. If Soldier becomes better, Hanzo becomes worse, even if you don't touch him, because Soldier's easier. And then they made Hanzo a bit easier, then he was better. There is never a world where they're both equally as easy and viable to do range damage. Not possible. The one that is a fraction of a percentage better will see like 80 plus, 90 plus % pick rate, or be not an option. There's certain interactions in the game, like Mei versus tanks. Either Mei hard counters Wrecking Ball, or Wrecking Ball wins the matchup and can outplay Mei to the point where you wouldn't want to pick her anyway, and she's just deleted from the meta. That's how it works. Balance only affects who wins matchups and how the hierarchy is set up. There will always be a hierarchy. To think that you can just flatten the hierarchy and make multiple things viable at the same job is physically not possible, mathematically speaking. The only place where that is possible is at lower tiers of play, where the game does kind of function that way. But at the higher tiers, where the skill on these characters is becoming maxed out, you have to pick for the best possible advantage. Otherwise, the value difference is way too big. Okay, so that's my little rant about balance. It's definitely a good thing that with hero pool rotations, we're also getting much faster balancing, but really we should be looking for balancing to make the game play well, not to create hero diversity necessarily. Okay, getting back to Jeff's posts now. He's asked any information yet on how many heroes will be available in a week of hero pool, and Jeff answers, for the first 5 weeks, we'll be trying a range to see what feels right. We've architected this system so that we can update the hero pools without the need to patch. So we'll be monitoring feedback very closely, experimenting a bit with the pool and adapting our strategy as time goes on. This is important because if they only ban out a small subset of heroes that aren't even meta, well, it'll have no impact, right? I kind of would like to see a mix of some top meta picks being banned, and then maybe a mix of middle and lower tier picks as well. And with that, every week would have a new personality of how you had to play. And in regards to balance, Jeff Kaplan responds to Ryan, who asks, I have to ask though, what is the point of having super fast and drastic balance changes if we are going to be enforcing weekly metas with hero pools anyway? Like, what is the point of nerfing or buffing a hero if they can only be played whether they are in that week's pool or not? And Jeff responds, historically, even when we have done consistent and dramatic balance changes, it takes the meta a long time to shift. We'd love it if balance or player creativity alone would shift the meta fast enough to meet players' demands. And this specifically is kind of a twofold problem where, as I said, you don't really shift the game with balance and then add diversity. You just rotate what is the best. You can mix up the hierarchy, but you can't flatten the hierarchy. And I think people are really confused about that. Hero limitations are the only way to get diversity. Hero balance often will make a comp weaker and harder to play, like it did with Goats comp or Double Barrier in some ways, but it might not change the reasons why they're meta. That's the thing. The most recent Double Barrier comp or Goats, for example, required expert use of things like tank synergies playing together as a team in Goats, or extreme peak discipline with ranged DPS and ranged angles and crossfires with the Hanzo meta and expert uses of Mei Wall. There was certain power aspects of these kits, like Zarya is like low-key one of the major reasons why Goats became a thing. Don't believe the hype when people say, well, in Season 1, Stage 4, Brigitte was stronger. Goats could have been played then. No. Lucio got buffed. Zarya got buffed. Lucio Sound Barrier got massive buffs so that Goats couldn't die to team wipes. Zarya got a charge buff that made it so that she was all the damage you needed, being able to snowball fight to fight, making Goats much more economical. And remember, those were heroes that were weak previously to that. The desire to get Mercy and Winston Diva out of the meta, buffing Zarya and Lucio, gave us Goats. It's a huge lie to say that, well, Goats would have been strong in Season 1. Not true. This is why I'm trying to tell everybody that balance just changes who becomes strong. Either Zarya and a Deathball playstyle is really good or it's really bad. It's one of the two because of how severe the rock, paper, scissors gameplay in Overwatch works. We're currently seeing similar problems where Moira, I keep saying, got overly buffed to her resource, which was her major weakness originally. She sort of had a shotgun playstyle where if you could win the brawl team fight quickly, you were Gucci, but once she could heal for much longer, then all of a sudden it flipped where poking into that tank comp became bad. And in fact, you probably were powering up the comp by giving them coalescence. Whereas prior to that, we already saw quad tank comps get played with Moira in Season 1 of Overwatch League, and they were weak to getting poked out because Moira would run out of resource. That meant that the DPS ults that you would get would win the fight. You see, it's very cut and dry in black and white how this ends up playing out. Either you can poke out a Deathball comp, get a DPS ult that kills it, or Lucio Soundbearer gets buffed to always keep you alive along with other support options that can do the same, right? Like if Sound Barrier beats all the DPS ults, what does poking to get a DPS ult do? It just loses you the fight anyway. It's far less complicated than people make it seem, actually. Now, I think the first major concern players have is that the hero pool selections for the week might feel too limiting. For example, Jeff gets asked by a player saying, I love playing tanks, but I'm horrible at Diva. Please don't make me play Diva, essentially. And Jeff says, we would never limit the hero pool to just one tank. You'll never be forced to play a single tank, such as Diva, as described above. If you love playing all the other tanks, you'll be fine. On a similar note, he goes on to say it's curated by us, meaning the hero pool, so it will be a combination of targeting metas that players are being vocally negative about, recent examples, Double Barrier, Goats, etc., and slightly encouraging other playstyles, i.e. more mobile comps, might be fun for a week, but I'm sure we will refine our approach over time. Jeff gets asked about a seasonal rotation, and Jeff responds saying that we talked about a seasonal rotation, but taking hero out of play for 2 months makes us a bit nervous. Never say never, but it's not our first instinct. And this is actually one of the key arguments that brought me more on board for hero pools over hero bans, because if a meta-defining hero doesn't get balanced fast enough, then they will be targeted by bans for an extended period of time. I acknowledge this and thought it was a sacrifice that I was willing to make, but in comparison, having a meta change every week instead is a much faster cadence for players to be able to keep up with Overwatch, because I feel like people have a lot of doom and gloom about, oh, you go away from Overwatch for a week, you just never come back. I don't think that's how players work, because I think they already interact with Overwatch that way. There's players that play it all the time for sure, but I think there's far more players that pop in and out infrequently nowadays, and scheduling when you come in to play Overwatch for the exact experience you want is more in line with like waiting for a longer queue to get the role you want, and is kind of a good thing in that regard, in my opinion. But yeah, I agree, like 2 months not being able to play a hero entirely might be kind of bad. And also, It's exactly the kind of problem that we're trying to get away from with the way things are done now. Like, I know at most ranks of play, a lot of people feel like you can play lots of heroes, but as you get higher and higher, for sure, the meta already bans out most of the heroes from being options. You can try to play them, but you're probably just throwing with them. Even if we had targeted bans, there'd be a limited amount of diversity that would create, whereas hero pools weekly give us a new thing each week. All right, that's it on hero bans for now. There was lots of other things that got mentioned in these posts, as well as in the developer update, which I have just been too enamored with hero pools to really discuss. But in the developer update, Jeff also mentioned that there's going to be player card improvements, which is awesome. Get those player icons sortable, please. I can't wait for that. We'll be able to share replays with each other soon, which is huge for content creation and will make it a lot easier to review your guys' gameplay. We've slowed down a little bit on review and guidey type videos, mostly because we knew the game was in such a volatile state that it's hard to prescribe ways to teach the game when it might change in a week, which it's kind of done anyway. But now that we know the type of game we're going to be playing, at least for the next few months, we can go back to teaching the game a bit more now that we have a more normalized rule set. The rule set's chaotic, but it is more normalized and regular anyway. Jeff also posted on the forums talking about a lot of the other things that are coming up. Someone asked about the 132 system going into the experimental mode, and Jeff sort of teases him here, saying, "Oh, that sounds fun. We should let you all try, huh?" I think Jeff is excited to get that 132 system some reps in the experimental mode, so almost guaranteed that that'll be coming. And also, Jeff states that the experimental card won't be ready until the end of February. For now, you can test it by not playing Torp for a week. Next week, don't play Symmetra, and with a smiley face, only playing with you. That's a good joke. I love it when Jeff makes these Overwatch meme hero-related jokes. I approve. Jeff gets asked if the PTR would still be in use now that they have the experimental card, and he answers that we'll still use the PTR for major patch changes. If they're testing a new hero or map, that would be on the PTR, not the experimental card. Keep in mind, guys, that the PTR is for bug testing. So to get something operational, you can expect it to come to the PTR when it's new. But if they're trialing changing things, that can go on the experimental card. Jeff gets asked about Smurfs on consoles, and Jeff responds that this is a very hard problem to solve, but we have some ideas. Any solution is more long-term though, possibly Overwatch 2 or later. Sorry, I know that's not the answer you wanted, but it's actually very complicated with the way consoles work and the rules regarding account creation. But it'd be interesting to see how they handle this with Overwatch 2, which I've always believed was probably going to be a next-gen console launch title, or launch window title at least. So perhaps they'll be able to work out with the consoles how new accounts work in the game at that time. Jeff got asked a bunch of different questions about other things that are on people's wish lists. This one asks about being able to see stats along with each replay on your profile page. Jeff says we want this too, more likely for Overwatch 2 at this point. There are new things coming to the workshop, which is always good to see. Jeff gets asked about a full-on new scoreboard for Overwatch 2, and he says that if they do one, not confirming if they will or not, he said, we definitely want to do more with stats and provide more statistics to players. That's good to know. The gold medal system has always been jank. Jeff gets asked if the new profile update will bring new level borders. Unfortunately, no, but there are going to be profile improvements coming soon. We spoke about that in the dev update. And that's it for Jeff Kaplan posts. Holy moly, it's been a lot of communication from the devs. Man, it feels like Overwatch has relaunched or something. Things have been popping. I definitely approve. Now for the end of the video outro, if you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like, but as well, I'm gonna nag you guys about our second channel yet again on Clickheads. If you've missed Eddie the Chump posting content, he's on there, as well as myself once in a while, making content about gaming news on the whole. As much as we think Blizzard is doing a great job with Overwatch right now, unfortunately, Warcraft 3 has been kind of a disaster with the relaunch of Reforged. And if you'd like to see a video discussing that disaster of a situation, Eddie's got you covered. You can check that out, linked in the description, or by clicking the card on screen. That's been it for me, guys. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. Head over to Clickheads, and we'll see you guys next time.